welcome everybody. Numbers have stabilized. Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. If you're joining us from the UK, it's probably cold where you are, so I hope you're keeping safe and keeping warm. And as I mentioned, we've had hundreds of people register for this evening's webinar. So clearly the issue of sleep and nutrition and what and how we eat resonates with so many of you. Now, sleep can be an issue for people of all ages, but we know from research that was done by the British Menopause Society that about 60% of women experience sleep issues as they go through menopause. And there's been lots of articles published about sleep this month. And in one interesting one I read, it showed that women are much more likely to have sleep issues more than men, and women actually need more sleep than men. So, and we can come to some of that in a little bit. As I said, we've dedicated all of our January newsletters and social media posts to all things sleep. And I'm really thrilled to be joined this evening by the marvelous Nigel Denby, the award-winning registered dietitian and founder of the 40,000 strong menopause support community, Harley Street at Home. What Nigel doesn't know about nutrition isn't worth talking or writing about. And he's got some brilliant tips. And Nigel, you've said it, you know, practical things that your granny might know, but sometimes it's the blinding glimpse of the obvious that we've forgotten about, and we just need a bit of a reminder on it. So if you have any questions, please do pop them into the chat. We'll either take questions as we go through, or we'll take them at the end, whatever works best. As you'll appreciate, Nigel won't be able to answer individual specific medical queries, but we can, of course, talk to you or answer them at a broad level. So Nigel, if we just kick off with a quick reminder of why sleep is so important to us, why it really is the foundation for good physical and mental health.
Oh, Helen, I mean, yeah, brilliant place to start. Sleep is kind of everything, isn't it? You know, without a good night's sleep and good quality sleep, our ability to function, to carry out normal everyday tasks is impeded. And also I think our perception of discomfort and some of the symptoms that women might experience at perimenopause tends to be heightened if you're trying to live through your day on insufficient or poor quality sleep. And as you say, so many women, the findings you quote mirror exactly what we hear in Harley Street at Home from our members, that sleep is one of those symptoms that I think is really bothersome, and it is at the top of women's lists. You know, I often also talk to women about weight, and that's right up there as well. But you know, when you just are going day after day after day on a poor level of sleep, everything becomes a real task. And I think it just gets to the point where it's actually can often be the tipping point for a woman to reach out for help and just say, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, because it's very hard to have willpower, energy to do anything, isn't it? When you're tired. And the thing is, we're all familiar then with the short-term impact of, you know, not having a good night's sleep. It's hard to concentrate, you know, it's hard to be resilient, it's hard to have the physical energy. But there's more data emerging, isn't there, around the long-term consequences on cognition, dementia, Alzheimer's, even cancer. So not to scare anyone, but just to reinforce that we really need to make sleep a priority. That there are no medals for saying, you know, it's great, I can manage on 3 or 4 hours sleep a night. It's important that we invest this quality time to make sure that we do get sleep. So we'll kind of launch into it now. Now I know we've a question from Debbie in the Q&A, and we'll come to that towards the end, Debbie. Nigel, I'll pick it up with you. But one of the questions we often get is, and especially from perimenopausal women, is what is it about the menopause transition that can impact our sleep patterns? So maybe a quickie on that, Nigel, before we get into the role of diet.
Well, it comes back to, again, that old favourite of the fluctuating, reducing levels of hormones having an impact on brain function, on your body's natural thermostat. So the temperature at which your body settles out, your temperature changes as you go into sleep. Changing levels of estrogen can also have an impact on your bladder. So they can mean that you're needing to get up a couple of times in the night to go to the loo and then struggle to get back to sleep. And I think it's also important to remember that the difficulties that women might be having with their sleep vary from one woman to another. So sometimes it's a case of struggling to get off to sleep in the first place. Other women may find they have no issue getting off to sleep, but they wake after an hour or two and then struggle to get back again. Other women may find that that isn't the issue, but they're waking up at sort of 4 o'clock in the morning and then not going back off to sleep again. So waking up very early. And again, I think, you know, the thing we need women to understand here is that sleep or disrupted sleep can be as big a symptom of the menopause as hot flushes, as some of the more frequently talked about obvious symptoms of the menopause. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't a symptom, and it is just as valid to present to your doctor saying that this is something you want help with. As you said, there is no medal for stoically going on night after night putting up with this, because there is an awful lot that can be done to help.
Yeah, and I'll just pick up, Julie, thank you for your question. It's a great one. And I've got an observation on it. And Nigel, if you've any thoughts on it. Julie's question says, it seems this must be age related rather than menopause related, because human males lacking estrogen can sleep. Can you comment? I guess one of the things I'd say is you're right. You know, sleeping issues can increase with age. But I suppose what's particular to women and then going through the menopause is, as you said, Nigel, some of the symptoms from menopause that can impact sleep, like night sweats, achy joints. You know, if you find, you know, you've bladder issues and you need to go to the loo more often, they can also, you know, if you're suffering from anxiety, they're worrying, you know, catastrophizing. They're all things that they're not necessarily sleep issues in and of themselves, but they can cause sleep issues.
Oh, Helen, absolutely. And then even if you are starting to notice a pattern that perhaps your sleep is disturbed for any number of those reasons, and then you start worrying about your sleep, that in itself
Yeah,
can cause you to run into issues. So
yeah,
I think, you know, often there is a difference between sleep disturbance and insomnia as such. And sometimes, you know, again, a sleep expert will really help you navigate what is going on. But I think sometimes, again, just stepping back a little bit, having some conversation, listening to a session like this does enable some women to work out, right, actually, I am waking up really hot. That's what the issue is. It's night sweats that are disturbing my sleep. This isn't insomnia. If I get the night sweats under control,
exactly.
or if I get the bladder issues under
Hmm.
control, or my anxiety under control, actually, I might well find that the sleep improves anyway.
Yeah. And in the webinar that Dr. Claire and Dr. Sarah are going to do that I mentioned at the top, they'll get into that in more detail. But what we really wanted to focus on in tonight's session and really drawing on your expertise is, you know, very practically, we all need to sleep, we all need to eat. But sometimes the things that we eat don't promote a good night's sleep. So on that, Nigel, can you just help us to understand the role that diet and what we eat can play in promoting better sleep in
Yeah.
general and during the menopause in particular?
Okay, so in terms of promoting sleep, there are one or two things to consider, but I think there's probably more things in the diet that might inhibit sleep. So it would be lovely, wouldn't it, to say, you know, just eat an aubergine at 7 o'clock at night and you'll have a cracking night's sleep. If only it worked that way. There aren't really uh, nutrients as such that are proven to really improve sleep. But there are dozens of things in our modern diet that are not conducive to good sleep. And they're often actually things that we lean on when we are beginning to struggle with sleep. So I've got quite a list here that I'll run through, and maybe we'll sort of start taking them one at a time. And again, forgive me if some of these do seem somewhat obvious, but there are some points here I think to take note of. So the first one, of course, is caffeine. And thinking about where your caffeine comes from. So I've got a cuppa on the go here. I wouldn't dream at 6:15 in the evening drinking caffeinated tea now. Caffeine, and particularly tannins and the caffeines that stay in tea, can stay in your body for a good 6 hours. So when I want to go to bed at 10 o'clock tonight, that is still going to be circulating. So I would really suggest any caffeinated drinks, teas, coffees, cola, make sure that they are caffeine free, really after about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's often earlier than people will think. So many people like to have a warm drink in the evening. There are some really great herbal teas, things like chamomile, lemon and ginger. The red bush tea is really quite nice if you get used to that. But there are also really good decaf coffees and teas to try those as well. And as I say, don't forget about caffeine. Even chocolate contains some caffeine. And if you are finding that you're exhausted because you've had a lousy night's sleep, and then you're looking for sugary foods, particularly chocolate, perhaps grazing on that in the evening, that is going to be introducing caffeine into your body. So really try to watch those things, and don't not drink though, because again, dehydration isn't going to help you with sleep either. So look for some decaffeinated or naturally caffeine-free alternatives. Whilst we're staying on drinks, the other thing that can often happen is to think, I'll have a couple of glasses of wine. That will get me off. That will get me in a good night's sleep. And what we know about alcohol is it actually has a detrimental effect on sleep. Very often it will lead to quite a disturbed night's sleep, and using alcohol as a way of trying to get tired, get relaxed, get some sleep is kind of like putting an elastoplast over a gaping wound. It just isn't going to touch the sides, and in fact it's going to do more harm than good. So again, if that's something that you're struggling with, or that you're in the habit of doing, again, I mean, by all means, switch maybe to an alcohol-free beer or a glass of wine to enjoy in the evening, but don't rely on the alcohol itself to support the sleep.
Yeah,
So
and Nigel,
go on.
just on alcohol, because one of the things I'm wondering, this was certainly, I found this, that I've become more sensitized to alcohol as I went through the perimenopause in particular, and it's now stayed at that level in that I'm way more sensitive to headaches, and it's not about drinking a lot, it's even after a glass, but also really impacting the quality of my sleep.
Absolutely. And again, this is what those falling levels of estrogen are doing. They essentially can make you more sensitive to all kinds of things, including alcohol. And what we tend to see, yes, as you exactly describe, is that alcohol will often be linked with that bit of waking later, after having an hour or two sleep, and then waking and not being able to get back to sleep. The other thing alcohol will do, if you do suffer with night sweats, is exacerbate those night sweats. So quite the reverse, thinking that alcohol is going to get you to sleep. But something I think that an awful lot of women will use initially as a way to try and help and support. Another area just to think about in general, before sort of general lifestyle and generally where you are at this point in your life. If you are carrying a little bit of extra weight, and it's surprising, it doesn't need to be a huge amount of extra weight, you can start to struggle with something called sleep apnea, which we often think about with people who are very overweight, but we now know that you don't need to be hugely overweight for this to be an issue. And it tends to involve your windpipe and getting oxygen to the brain. And it can mean that without actually waking up, your sleep is disturbed by your breathing pattern many, many times throughout the night. And although you might not wake and actually get out of bed, you may find that you're waking up just never feeling as if you're rested. Now, the golden number really with anyone who is struggling with weight and thinking about other health issues, apnea included, is to lose about 10% of your body weight. Now that doesn't mean jumping down to, the weight you were when you got married or being a size 8 or anything like that. If you're 90 kilos and you lose just about a stone and a half, that is massive in terms of what that will do for your health in general, and potentially your sleep. And of course, another way that you're going to help with that, if you're trying to lose a little bit of weight, is by getting more active. And there's a chemical that we know is directly linked with sleep called melatonin. And this is actually, you can't buy it in the UK as a supplement, but often you can get it by in bucketfuls in the States if you go there. And there's loads of times you'll hear people asking people to pick up some melatonin for them. Now, melatonin is a hormone you can make your own. You don't need to go to the States and get it. The way you get it is by being active. And as soon as you start some activity in the morning, you start making the melatonin that is going to help you sleep in the evening. So one of the best things you can do to improve your sleep is not drinking a glass of turmeric tea or something like that. It is getting out and going for a walk in the morning. It's not necessarily going to start working immediately, but it is by far one of the biggest benefits that you'll get from increasing your physical activity levels. And it will work much more effectively than taking a supplement, even if you can get someone to bring some back from the States for you.
Yeah. No. Yes, I'm familiar with the melatonin gummies that one can get in the States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we start thinking about, so we've looked at drinks and we've thought about caffeinated drinks, alcohol. The things then to start thinking about that might not necessarily have a direct impact on the sleep mechanism, but might disturb your sleep. So fatty foods and spicy foods in particular are two things that can cause issues. So fatty foods predominantly can cause indigestion. Simple as that. And you may well find that foods that you used to manage, a fish supper at 8 o'clock at night, might well have been something you could do quite easily, as you say, also, with a glass of wine 5-6 years ago. Now you may find that really doesn't suit you very well. And so fatty foods in particular take longer to digest. They can kind of cause you that heartburn feeling, that real area discomfort at the top part of your chest. And so by making sure that your evening meal is really well balanced, a model I'd like to use, if you imagine this is your plate and you divide your plate into 4 quarters. 1/4 protein, 1/4 carbohydrate, and half of that plate fruit, veg, or salad. Now, why would you be doing that? How's that going to help with fatty food? Well, first of all, if half of your plate is fruit, veggies, or salad, that's going to bring the fat down anyway. The protein area, we're really looking at trying to bring in high quality protein. So things like fish, lean meat, chicken, tofu, lentils, these kinds of things. things you've maybe cooked from scratch, so you're not looking at things in batter and breadcrumbs or deep fried foods. And I'm going to come on to the carbohydrates in a minute. If you keep that balance right, you are always going to be getting all the nutrients you need. And exactly, someone's saying, I've heard that before in Slimming World. Yeah, I mean, this isn't my theory. This is a model that really works to make sure that you don't have to worry about supplements and specific nutrients. This is just going to give you everything you need. What it also does, though, is keeps you feeling satisfied, particularly if the carbohydrates you're choosing are what we call low glycemic carbohydrates. I'm going to come on to that in a minute. But why this is important is a lot of women struggle with nighttime grazing, evening grazing, when you're stood at the fridge thinking, what can I have? And usually that is going to be something sugary or something fatty. And it might well be cheese, it could be peanuts, it could be crisps, chocolate, confectionery, these sorts of things. Two things they're going to do: indigestion, because they're fatty. The other thing they're going to do if they're sugary foods is give you a big spike in blood sugars. That, remember when you used to send the kids to birthday parties and they would come home literally running off the ceiling? You're going to be more sensitive to that as well because of all these other hormonal changes. So you want to keep your blood sugars nice and stable. If you've had something sugary at night and you've got that big rush, you're then going to get a big slump. And either way, at the top of the rush, you're going to feel really wired, or at the bottom of the slump, you're going to feel dreadful and probably want to repeat it again, which is why we find, I had that biscuit, now I've had another and another and another. By balancing your foods out in the way that I've described, you've got a really good opportunity there to lengthen the period of satiety, of feeling satisfied. And less likely then to go on and graze on the sorts of foods I'm talking about. So when we think about, I mentioned low glycemic foods. So these are carbohydrates, they're good foods, all right? You do not need to be avoiding carbohydrates, but you can think about the type of carbs that you're choosing. So back to our model: quarter protein, quarter carbs, half fruit and veg. We're thinking about the carby bit here. So this is the rice, the potatoes, the bread, the pasta, any sorts of grains that you're thinking of. Some of those grains, these are whole foods, not sugar, that type of carbohydrate. These are complex carbs. Some of these foods will give you a spike in your blood sugars, just like eating a biscuit or a bit of chocolate would. Others are going to give you a very gentle rise in blood sugars that really doesn't impact your sleep at all. Those are the ones you really want to be including at your evening meal and ideally all the way through the day. So let's think of what that means. If you're choosing bread, for instance, interestingly, you don't really want to just go for white bread or just wholemeal bread. You really want to go for a wholemeal bread that's got lots of seeds or bits in it, like a granary type bread. The seeds really slow down how quickly the sugar releases into your bloodstream. Other types you could choose would be rye breads or pumpernickel breads, but anything that's got bits in it. So they don't need to be fancy, but those are the ones to go for. If you're using crackers, biscuits, oat cakes are very good. Rye crackers are very good, instead of something like a French stick or a cream cracker or water biscuits, purely because of this glycemic effect that we're talking about. If you're choosing pasta, it's fine to have pasta for dinner, but again, you'd have a small amount of pasta, some protein with it, and a big old salad and a veggie sauce to go on the top. That's how you balance that plate. Similarly with things like rice, you really want basmati rice is your best option, but there's another one, there's the red rice that you see around as well. It's got a posh name, I can never remember what it is, but red rice. That's great. But if you want to get the Tetra packs that you just bung in the mic, they're fine. but basmati a good choice. And when it comes to potatoes, little baby waxy potatoes or sweet potatoes, brilliant. Dieter's friend, the big old baked potato, not so great. That's going to be something that's going to impact your blood sugars a little bit more. Now, the thing to say is all of these things are tips and enhancements on a decent diet. This is, if you have chronic insomnia, changing to grainy bread is not going to fix that. There's lots of other things to do as well. I do want to talk a little bit about supplements because
Yeah, I think that would, yeah, that would be it. Before we come to supplements, can I just pop in a couple of questions that they're really relevant and they're great questions. One question, I'm sure we've all ate something before going to bed and really regretted it a few hours later, but there's a great question here. Is there a period of time that you'd recommend, Nigel, between eating and going to bed so that we're not going to be impacted with any digestive issues?
Really interesting. So, and I'm asked this a lot when it comes to weight and all sorts of things as well. A couple of things to say. Look, egg and chips at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the morning cannot make you any fatter. All right. Egg and chips is the calories that are on the egg and chips. That's it. The time of day you eat makes no difference to your weight at all. Egg and chips at 3 o'clock in the morning might give you indigestion. And that's where we go back to that fatty food. On the other hand, what I would always say is, though, going to bed really hungry, if you're an intermittent faster, or if you're going to bed really feeling, oh God, it was too late to eat, so I won't have anything, is not a great idea. That is not going to help your sleep either. So if you do find that, sometimes if you're watching a fantastic webinar about sleep, that means you're going to have your tea a bit later than normal, have something to eat, but maybe just make it a bit lighter, soup and a nice bit of grainy bread rather than, a big old biryani or something like that. Just be sensible about it. Generally speaking, though, I would say if you can try and eat by about 8 o'clock, give yourself 2 or ideally 3 hours really before you go to bed to start that digestive process. But again, I would far rather somebody does have something rather than go to bed really feeling hungry, because that's not going to work either.
Yeah, and then thank you. It's a really good tip and advice. And then another question here. Thank you, Alison. Is there anything that can be done nutritionally that could help with palpitations that are waking her up early in the morning and then she can't go back to sleep?
I would think if you're waking up early in the morning with them, this isn't a nutrition thing. I think maybe if you were a real caffeine drinker and you were then struggling at night trying to get to sleep with those, that might be connected. I don't think, though, that nutritionally that's going to be an issue. I know palpitations are a massive issue again with perimenopause. But yeah, I wouldn't waste your time looking at supplements or changing your diet to try and fix that. There's an easy.
Is that more chat to your doctor?
Yeah.
And I think there's lots of great questions in here about tips, should you get up, etc. We won't have time to cover those this evening because we're out of time already, but we'll take your questions. We will cover them in the next webinar. And when I send out the link to the video, as well as sending Nigel's information, I'll send a link to a sleep tips video that Dr. Claire, we've just put it out on YouTube this week, that addresses, brilliant questions. Should I get up if I can't go back to sleep? Dr. Claire covers all of that in her sleep tips video, and we'll go into that with Dr. Claire and Dr. Sarah in more detail. Also, if you hot flushes, going to the loo, etc., I would say, Garcian, without understanding your medical history, could very well be perimenopausal. Maybe talk to your doctor again. I'll put some links into articles about sleep, causes of sleep issues. And again, you might like to join the webinar that we'll be running in a few weeks to see if that might help you. Nigel, one of the questions was just
Yeah.
while I think of it, and very quickly and practically, and then we'll definitely come to supplements because there's a lot out there. And in terms of value for money, are there any that you think are worth it or not? But there was a really good question from someone who is on doing the fasting approach, and she just wanted to know if she can drink herbal teas during the fasting period.
Absolutely, goodness me, absolutely. I'm not a massive fan of fasting, but I'm not going to, try and dissuade you from doing it. If it suits you, go for your life. But absolutely, drink herbal teas, keep hydrated. I think with the fasting, really monitor how are you feeling, how well is that suiting you, and if you're not happy with it, don't bang your head against a brick wall, because there are lots of really good, easier ways to eat very well.
Thank you, Nigel. That's very clear. There's lots of other food related questions here, but if we maybe go to supplements, and then if
Yeah,
we've got a couple of minutes at the end, because I'm
yeah.
conscious we need to wrap up in the next 5 minutes. So, but supplements, Nigel, what are your thoughts on
Well,
supplements and sleep?
it will be quite quick, Claire, because Helen, because to be honest with you, you've got to remember the supplements that are out there, these are not drugs, these are food supplements. They are really poorly regulated. The food I give my dogs has better regulation than the vitamin and mineral supplement world. So there are loads of claims made about them, which are often very unfounded. Two of the big ones that are really talked about a lot in terms of sleep are magnesium, and also we've got sage, and we've also got turmeric. There is virtually no evidence supporting these as something that will help with sleep. If you've decided you want to try them and you feel absolutely wedded to them as something that is helping you, they are not going to do you any harm. But if you can see that really, after you've listened tonight and you listen to the next one with Dr. Claire, and you start really seeing that there are elements of your lifestyle that are not conducive to good sleep, taking a supplement of anything is not going to put that right. You really do need to start looking at your sleep hygiene. You'll hear loads about that in the next session, and your diet and your activity levels. If you were going to take any sort of supplement, there are really three that I would suggest might be worth doing. If you don't think you eat as well as you should all the time, and who does, you can always think about taking one multivitamin and mineral supplement as an insurance. That's it. If you don't want to do that, do take a vitamin D supplement. And we are learning more about vitamin D all the time and the impact that that can have on lots of different things. So vitamin D, 10 international micrograms a day, or 4,000 international units. They're the same measurement, just one over the counter from Boots, Tesco's, Holland and Barrett, doesn't matter. The last thing you might think about is a good quality probiotic. That's the thing that looks after the good gut bacteria in your gut. We are learning again more and more about the microbiome, this sort of environment in the gut, and we do start to see interesting impacts on things like your nervous system, the gut-brain axis, and potentially sleep. So if you have, as most of us have, at some stage in your life, taken antibiotics, had food poisoning, had some sort of abdominal surgery, maybe like a C-section, and lived a pretty stressful life, the likelihood is your microbiome might need a little bit of support. If you're going to use supplements, probiotics, there's a couple I would recommend. There's one called Simprove. There's another one called Optibac, and they're widely available, and really, do what they say on the tin. But otherwise, I think really, be cautious about supplements, teas, and all sorts of things. I know somebody mentioned their chamomile tea. Absolutely. Love it. really great thing. Anything that's going to help you relax, you know, and that's where I think also think about self-care. That's a real buzzword, and it sounds like it's something that, you know, only Davina can go and do. Everyone can have a bit of self-care. And sometimes if that just means, you know, trying out a bit of meditation, having 20 minutes in the bath, trying something like, you know, a face mask, going for a massage, finding a way to find just a bit of calm, doing breath work, face yoga, nighttime yoga that is a relaxing type of yoga, not a dynamic type of yoga that you might do in the morning.
Yeah.
All of these things are magical sometimes at transforming you, switching off from the day. More often than not, the issues to do with sleep are to do with spinning plates and just not being quite as able to do that as you might have been when you were 35. And, you know, very often when you come to look at it, the plates that you're spinning are plates you could put down. And sometimes that's the process of just learning, right, this is where menopause becomes a gift on many levels. It's difficult to imagine that when you're in the middle of it. But if that is the time when you start reevaluating your lifestyle and your diet and your exercise and self-care, without doing anything really radical, life can become really great.
Yeah, that great tips, and totally agreed, Anna. Falling asleep with meditation music, it's so soothing and so relaxing and de-stressing. So
Yeah.
Nigel, we've run out of time. We're definitely going to have you back again because we could have taken a lot more questions. Apologies if we didn't get to everyone, but what I'll do is when we send out the link to the video, I'll send out links to some of the questions, well, to the questions that people have here that will help answer them. We're also going to put the link into our Facebook group as well, which we just launched yesterday, so people can watch it there. And as I mentioned, our next event is on Thursday, the 25th of January at 7:30 p.m. Dr. Claire, Dr. Sarah Gilchrist. They will cover a lot of the medical sleep issues, some of which Nigel mentioned. They'll talk about the broad range of ways of managing sleep issues, from HRT to, you know, other solutions as well. But we know how important nutrition is. It's the bedrock, you know, along with sleep, the interplay between both. And so we wanted to have a bit of a deep dive in that tonight, and obviously lots of great questions. So Nigel, I know how busy you are since coming back from the holidays, and really appreciate you spending the time with us this evening.
Thanks for inviting me, and thank you for all the questions, ladies. I rabbited on a bit and thought I'd got a little bit longer, so my fault. I'm really sorry if I didn't get to answer
No,
all
you
the
were fabulous as
questions.
ever, Nigel. Really appreciate it. And again, and also, yeah, brilliant questions. And we will make sure we get you the information that you need from that, and really appreciate your participation. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Good night.